So first off, I just want to get a sense of you all. So in terms of your business, how many of you are, let's say, within the 1 to 2 year range? All right. And then 5 to, let's say, 2 to 5 years. All right. Just in terms of the age of your business. Just trying to get a sense of, are you startup? Are you, small business, been in business for a while and kind of gotten over the hump, or whether you've been, small business and been in business for a long time. So then 5 to 10 years or plus. Cool. This is great because everything I'm going to talk to you talk about will apply to every one of you, regardless of whether you're a startup or whether you've been in business, whether you're a small business, or even have been part of a large corporation. So who's this guy? Who's this guy that's standing in front of you? I went to Cal Poly. I'm a graduate of applied art and design way back a long time ago. But I have both experience at Nike. So I've been at Nike I was at Nike for 17 years. But I've also had small business, been part of a couple of startups, both as a founder or a co-founder, and then also as an early employee. So I know the full range of knowing what it's like to have immense resources and to be part of a slow-moving boat. But then I also know what it's like to literally start from nothing and have very limited resources and to hang on every decision and move quickly, as if your life and business depended upon it. So just know that I kind of span the whole gamut of small business to corporate life. What I'm going to talk to you about is design thinking, but narrow it down so that it's something that I wished I knew a lot earlier, and I found late. I wouldn't say late in my career, but midway through my career, and you have the opportunity to learn about it now. And to that end, I really want this to be something that impacts you today, something you can take and apply it, something that's one easy thing. It's doable for any team, and also doable for any size business. I think that's really important. And it's product, services, or experiences. It doesn't matter what you offer to your customer, this applies. And it doesn't take a ton of time. And I know that's, if for small business, time really does equate to money. So this is something that doesn't take a ton of time, but it does take work. And it's for inline, not just innovation. And this, applies to, in a bigger company, you would have special teams that would be doing inline, special teams that are doing innovation. This applies to it all. I like to start with this slide. So this was a CB Insights did a postmortem of all of the startups they worked for and consulted with, and compiled a pattern for what were the top reasons startups failed. And if you see this no market need, 35%. So 35% of startups that they worked with failed because they produced a service or a product that their market didn't need. Think of if they were able to crack this nut and ensure that they could create something their market or their customer needed, they would still be in business today, likely. And the other piece is this number is probably higher because running out of cash is directly influenced by the no market need. So those two numbers could likely influence each other upward. So I say this because if there's a way to do this and do this effectively and assure that you're going to meet your market need, this is a pretty powerful tool. Which relates to my own struggle. I wish I had this tool because obviously I came from Nike. You might be thinking, hey, Nike, they've been super successful, a powerhouse in brand, marketing, design. But as you get behind the walls, what you realize is most of the briefs that we got, the product briefs, were terrible. And oftentimes it was a piece of paper, you look at it, you have no clear idea of who the customer is, no clear idea of what the problem you're trying to solve. And oftentimes you just had no blueprint for success. And as a designer, we would then have to spend valuable design time and re-engineer who our customer is, what the problem we're solving, and figure out how we're going to solve this, oftentimes without any input until you get well into the design phase. And then that could go well, or it might not go well. It may be right for the business. It may not be right for the business. So I learned that early. And what I learned is the crux is briefing the problem, is really understanding the problem. And that's where design thinking I found to be really helpful. So design thinking, it's typically a pretty involved process. And that's why you hire consultants to come in and bring their teams in and help you crack the code. And often they do it for you. I can't do that. That's way too complicated for me. I like to simplify it to 3 things. And what I've done is this represents the entire product creation cycle and from an inline perspective. So the first section there, that's really the pre-brief. That's where you understand what the problem is, what you identify your user, defining your user, and then going through the whole process to understand who they are and what your product is going to do for them, and actually what product do they actually need too. Oftentimes it's maybe even being willing to throw out your beloved baby product and create something they really want. Then the brief, and then the solve part, that's really when you're going through the ideation, the prototyping, the testing, revolving around, doing it again, and then you get to confirmation. And that's when you actually have the product, and it may at that point be then kick off into production. And at the same time, that's when you start the go-to-market process. So that's when you start working with your retailers, working with kicks off marketing and your storytelling, and then it rolls out to the whole, going to market. I find that the most important part of this entire process is right there on that first section, what I call the C, because it's there that you can go through a very defined set of procedures where you can empathize and find the problem and understand what you're trying to do with the brief. Then once you have the brief, the whole process starts to it essentially run by its own momentum. Obviously, as a team, you still have to do a lot of work, but it does create a bit of momentum. The other piece of this is what you define in the brief is ultimately what your story is at the back end. And I've seen this all too many times when you get to this part of the process after you've solved the problem and created the product, you try to spin the whole marketing angle, and it's just you're literally making stuff up at that point. And I love this quote. It's Charles Kettering, a famous innovator and at General Motors. Problem well stated is a problem half solved. And I don't know about you, if you've been in the situation where you actually do come up with a really defined brief and a really well-stated problem, the project just takes a momentum of its own. And I found that to be the true to myself as well. So a product brief, really? That's what I've came to talk about. Who cares about a product brief? My point is, especially today, if you don't go through that pre-brief work of understanding your customer and understanding what they need and the problem, you're either going to stand in or blend in or stand out. It's literally that. It's that critical. And what I'd like to point out is the Web 2.0 effect. So if we look at the year 2000 to roughly 2018, 2019, look at what that period of time did for creative services, for graphic design, for website design. It pretty much democratized that entire process. I'm a graphic designer by training, and like now the graphic design world that I entered into, where you had a handful of national experts who knew how to draw, and you literally paid them lots of money to do their craft, you can now buy, overseas or online, and you can also do it yourself. And, even now, highly doubt some of the IP, but you can, essentially AI is now churning out logos and logo types, which was my specialty back when I created, or back when I started out. The other part is look at what's happened with handheld phones, how that has been democratized, and then just automobiles. Look at what a Hyundai was or a Mercedes was 20 years ago, and look at them today. Like the web and computers and data have literally equalized all of those brands to the point where really it's brand legacy oftentimes that elevates a certain brand or not. It's not necessarily the product. Now, the new era of AI, it's going to accelerate that equalization. This was a recent study with Boston Consulting, and they took their bottom half of their skilled participants in a certain project and their top half skilled participants. The green represents not using ChatGPT or AI. The blue is with the augment of AI. And what's happened is the lower bottom half skilled participants had a 43% jump in their effectiveness in their skills for this given project. The top half skilled saw only a 17%. Now, if you extrapolate that to brands and products, all of a sudden, people who are brands that were competitors now likely have a huge bump. So if you want to stand out in that marketplace, you better bring your A game, because it's just going to take that much more to be a leader in your field. What will happen is it's going to create more of a sea or more of a risk of being in a sea of commodity. And, I'll just speak for myself, but I think we're all here. We don't want to contribute to that sea of commodity, especially when oftentimes the world needs our products. The world needs the products that our user really wants and desires. So how do you avoid being a commodity? I know Airbnb is a bit controversial, but it's inarguable that they have taken something that could be very commoditized and created a pretty powerful brand. So what they've done is it's not necessarily what they do, which has created a strong brand or has elevated them above commodity. It's their deep story. Essentially what they've done is they've realized that their user, when they travel, don't want to stay in a boring, inauthentic, unimaginative place. They realize that there's a human need for their customer to want to feel like they belong when they go anywhere. So if they travel, they want to go there and they want to be of the people. They want to feel like they belong, like they've been there, they're part of the community. It's their neighborhood. And that's a really strong human need to belong. And so that's their story. So in summary of this first part, product brief is really, there's a huge impetus for us all as businesses, brands, to stand out versus creating commodity product. AI is going to be the great equalizer. The best product doesn't always win, but it's the best product in combination with the best story connected to your customer, and deep insights separate the best from the rest. So how do we do this? We gather better data than anybody else is getting. And my little asterisk is this is how you do it in 3 hours or less. So again, just that the first part of this design thinking process, it's all about empathizing, which leads to the brief. And we do that by using empathy. And I've broken out empathy as seeing the user, but doing it in three very distinct ways. It's by looking, it's by living. So looking is observing your user in their context. By live or experiencing what they experience, again, in that very specific context. However, it can be opened up into their culture and understanding the influences that would make your product or service or experience relevant. And then listen, this is where we take what we've learned and then we feed that back to make sure we fully understand, because there's part of that where we don't want to assume. The whole part of this is to eliminate as much bias as possible from our process. And so to give you a sense of what this looks like and give you a blueprint, here's a case study. So as I mentioned, I've worked for a couple of startups. One of the startups I've worked for was we created premium mountain bike apparel. And we made products like a Pendleton shirt that had about 125 different component pieces that was built specifically for on-bike comfort. And that was I think it was $235 Pendleton shirt. Our flagship was a $285 mountain bike short with Swiss high-performance mountaineering fabric, magnetic closures, zippers. I mean, we spared no expense, and it was, surprise, one of the best products that we had and our most beloved. Also surprise, not a surprise, we also didn't sell that many, but we did well. But we wanted to make sure that we had, of our customer base, we kept hearing a need for a $100 short. So our goal was to figure out, how do we take this $285 short that people love and de-spec it to a $100 short? As you might imagine, that's a pretty tall order, because what if we got it wrong? What if we missed what people loved about that short? And how do you distill that down so that you can still offer those same things at $100? So that was our problem that we had to solve. So what we created a very quick immersion study where we had 4 of the team members, so 4 people from our team, a designer, a merchandiser, a person who does the manufacturing, and then we had 4 actual users. So we handpicked essentially a male and a female from each of our representative user groups. And so with those 8 people, we were going to test our shorts for a very short amount of time. So in this case, obviously, it's the user is our hero. It wasn't about us as a company and our experience with our shorts. We wanted to make sure that we were able to get that experience, but more importantly, we wanted to have those users who are part of our study, to verify that information. So the very first thing is look. So this is where we watched everybody with the shorts on. And the other thing I want to point out is we did our own shorts, and we also did the best competitor shorts available to us as well. And we looked at things like, how is it fitting? How is the user just moving in the shorts? Do they feel like they're distracted? Are they fiddling with things? Or do they feel like it's very natural and at ease? Things like, how did the phone, this was a big call out we knew from our customers, is carrying phones or carrying keys. How did those pieces, how did they carry in the shorts? Did they slide down really low, as you can see in this Patagonia short? Or did they ride just in the right spot and allow for movement? So we just captured all those observations, and then we wrote those down on sticky notes, as many observations, as many thoughts as we could, without any judgment. Just write down whatever we had. So you can probably guess that's what we're going to do right now. So if you could crack open the Post-it notes in front of you. And I'm going to circle back to that photograph I just showed you. And what I want you to, what you all to do is as many things as possible, each on different, separate sticky notes. Write down, I notice, whatever you notice. I'll just give you a few moments to look at this photograph and just say, I notice, and what are you noticing? And just write a separate sticky note for each of the things that you notice.
And we're not thinking about any particular product or
No.
service, we're just noticing things?
Just noticing whatever you notice in that photograph right there.
Thank you.
I'll give you guys just a few more minutes. All right, go ahead and finish up on your whatever note you're on. Okay, so there's a second part to this. Now, given those observations that you just wrote down, now let's jump to a conclusion. I wonder if. So for the next part of the exercise, complete the sentence, I wonder if, using the same image or scenario. So just curious, the first question I noticed, what are some examples of things you wrote down that you noticed? You just, say it to the group. Uh-huh. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. What else? Yeah. Yeah. That's kind of hard to see. Totally. Yeah.
So far we've gotten the horse, the uniform, the truck.
That's 6 kids, ages 2 to 9,
Yeah.
about 26 people.
Uh-huh. And then jumping ahead, what did you surmise from this? What types of what conclusions did you draw? Potential conclusions? Yeah,
A parade,
Mardi Gras party. Yeah.
Mardi Gras party,
Kid parent,
Mm-hmm.
tailgate
Yeah.
party.
horse is real.
Wonder if the horse is real.
Yeah.
Wonder what's in the sky.
Yeah, that's like just like the looking up and then the not smiling. Yeah. I mean, there's maybe one person smiling at her own kid, but yeah, the other one seemed pretty unemotional. So I know that it might be a little disruptive, but could we, on this right here, could you bring your notes? And it doesn't have to be pretty, but literally just stick your notes up on this whiteboard.
Both observations and I wonder if.
Yeah, they don't have to be separated in any way, and they obviously they don't even have to be visible. It's just more of just to show how many ideas that we were able to come up with in a short amount of time. Yeah, and they don't have to be fully visible, just to show what our output was. Perfect. Yeah, if they fall down, that's fine. Great. That's cool. Thank you. All right, thanks. Taking one with you. That's all right. That's cool. Great. Thanks for doing that. I mean, I think what this shows, this is just one part of the process, 1/3 of the process. We've come up with probably 150 to 200 observations alone. And you'll see this is just 1/3 of what we're doing, because the next bit is to actually, now that you've observed it, that's great, but now we want to experience it. And so with our exercise, we had those 4 people who are internal, 4 people who are external or representative of our user. And we had them in our shorts and we got them on bikes. And so with that experience, we had each person go and ride for a certain amount of time. It was controlled, and then come back and immediately, once they had that experience, write down everything that came to mind, every single thought, experience, feeling, distraction, whatever. And they wrote these down. So it were things like the fabric was noisy, or the zipper was rubbing in a certain way, or the waistband just wasn't in the right spot, or I didn't feel anything. I mean, it was both positive and not so positive observations, just whatever observations. And we collected those observations, so add it to the pile. Then we took that entire pile of Post-it notes and put the representative notes on the window here. And then we had each participant describe some of their top observations or their top experiences. And then we also we went through the notes as well. And if there were certain notes that didn't quite make sense or were kind of interesting and needed a little more clarification, we allowed for those participants to bring that clarification to mind. And so the idea here is to really just make sure we are understanding the data and not just collecting the data, because there may be a real interesting insight or a nugget that we might find because of that clarification. So again, this process literally took about 90 minutes, or 90 minutes to 120 minutes. And it's using empathy of look, live, and listen. And the outcome, we came out with hundreds of notes, both visual, experiential, and verbal data. We had team buy-in. This is the other thing, is because we had the actual product team as participants in the data collection, we had team buy-in, and they also had more of a visceral understanding of what we experienced as well. And we did this in less than 3 hours. So to simplify, we have a simplified framework using empathy as the tool for gathering, and with the case study of mountain bike shorts to figure out what was the essential, what made that product at a $285 level valuable for a $100 level. So now we have all these great, all this data. How do we assimilate that data into something that's actionable and useful for our product? We find the deeper insight. And as we mentioned with Airbnb, it's the deeper story. That's what we're looking for. It's great to have a great product. We need the deeper story. So this was a Nike defined an insight in this way. So an insight is a deep truth about the customer or their culture that we can leverage to help solve a problem. And so this is a great illustration of most companies and products start at the top of the tree. It's usually like, oh, a thing, like people need things. I can do a thing. I'll create a thing and put it out in the marketplace. Some hit, some don't, but then others delve a little deeper and are looking at like, oh, this is what people are doing. There might be a need or a problem I can solve here. But the really strong brands, I'm sorry, it's that little piece is covering it. The really strong brands, and this is where the Airbnb and Nike to a great degree, they go at the motivations, the why people are doing something. And if you can hit all 3 of those, but be really clear as to what the motivation of your customer is, that deeper, visceral motivation, desire, something that hits at the core of our human needs, that's where you have something that will connect on a really deep insight level. So how do we do this? So we have our cluster of data. Now we need to separate those into smaller clusters and then also cluster them into like themes. So in our case, we started to see themes of fabric, how we carry things, fit, and then just a few kind of interesting tidbits that we didn't really, that there weren't enough of them to put them into a category, but they were interesting enough to note and keep them on the page. Then we had each participant, we gave them 3 votes, and we said, okay, out of this whole sea of Post-it notes, if you have 3 votes, which are the top 3 things that you would vote for? And in this case, pocket size and placement and fit for me were very clear, distinct winners. And dynamic and quiet fabric also had quite a bit of interest. So from there, the deeper insight is, how do we take these very clear, important observations and experiences, and is there something deeper that we can extract from that? Something that maybe, speaks to a motivation or something that speaks to a deep benefit. And so in our case, carry without distraction seemed like a really important benefit that should be cut across all of the shorts that we made. And there was a big idea in that statement of, I want to feel like I'm not wearing any shorts. That seemed like that could be overarching if we start to look at how other pieces might feed into that or influence that or detract from it, become a problem. But even here, we know we needed to delve a little deeper. And I'm sure you've heard of the idea of the 5 whys. And so we put this through the filter of the 5 whys. So we said, okay, why do you want to feel like you're not wearing shorts? And the user says, well, I want to be comfortable. Okay, that's great. I understand that. Why do you want to be comfortable? I don't want to be distracted when I'm out riding my bike. Great. Why don't you want to be distracted? I love the feeling of being in flow, especially when I'm on a trail and I need my full concentration. Oh, that's really interesting. Why is flow important to you? It's because I have my peak performance and I also have my best experiences with the people I ride with when I'm in a state of flow. So all of a sudden, like when you get down to that nugget, that's pretty powerful. And that's a story that you could literally hang a brand on if you get to that level. And then all of a sudden now we have a bar to say everything we make should contribute to that feeling of ultimate flow and being in the state of peak performance. And so that's what we did, is we had that as a meta. So we had our key insight. It didn't feel like we were wearing anything. And then we realized that there were 4 enablers that contributed to that. So in our case, it was fabric, it was fit, it was the tightening or the cinching mechanism, and it was how we carried our essentials for our ride. Oh, and then one thing I'll say is, then when you're searching for a problem, you start looking at the enablers, and are there certain enablers that on a certain product that aren't measuring up? Is the fabric not right? Is the fit not right? Is the carrying system not right? Those can now be your problems, because if you fix those problems, then you enable your key insight. So the outcome here, we've chunked hundreds of notes. We've identified the deep insight and the problem statement. Again, we did this together with the team, so we had team buy-in, super important, and we did this in less than 90 minutes. So step 1, find the patterns. Step 2, find the meaning and edit. And step 3, find that deeper insight by allowing those to bubble up and then running those through the 5 why filter. And then define your problems. What problems are in the way of realizing those deeper insights? Now I'm going to go into like, what is the brief itself? And through my years of working in startups and at Nike, I realized that briefs are almost universally terrible. And I've been able to find, like, there are 3 things that you need on a brief, absolutely need on a brief for it to be useful. And I'm going to share that with you. I wanted to point out that there's a QR code here. This tool is available via my website, so you can pull that down. And we'll also make sure at the end too that you can grab this information. So for a product brief, it can be as simple or as complex as you want it to be. I would rather the brief be just have enough information that you need. There needs to be some information on the business, things like distribution, price point, requirements such as sizing. Are there any sustainability requirements, functionality? Is this innovation timeline or is this inline timeline? Obviously, scope, is this a single item, a franchise? What is the requested launch date? You know, and competition and differentiation, some of those things. That's all great, but there's usually 3 things that are absolutely missing on a brief. And these are the top 3 things. I'll note that most customer personas are often vague, but at least in my experience. So making sure that is a necessary as well. But the top 3 things are the user insight. And one really easy way to make sure you have a user insight is by using this formula. A user needs blank the need or the problem to accomplish whatever the goal is. And the goal in our case, in our scenario, is that deep insight. Second, the user case. So in the user's voice, how can you describe the context of how, where, and why the customer will use this product? And then by describing emotions, the kind of the softer pieces, describe how they'll feel, describe what they're looking for in that experience, and really bring that to life in two or three paragraphs. And here is where the more you can write this so someone else, you know, on your team can understand it and really live that experience, the better the outcome, you know, of your brief and ultimately the product experience or service is going to be. And then 3, what problem are we trying to solve? Really clearly trying to, you know, state that. And it's really important here that it doesn't edge into a solution. So we do that by saying, how might we, and then filling out the rest of that sentence. Yeah, Joe.
Maybe you can talk just briefly about the temptation to develop those particular sections of your brief prior to doing the necessary research to really ground it in good data.
Right.
Because every product designer, developer, entrepreneur has intuitions about those things.
Right.
And it may be one of the greatest risks to the product or the business is to launch into that level of certainty without doing the due diligence.
Right. Yeah, I mean, that's why. So just understanding that we inherently have that bias to reach to a solution, you know, because I think all of this there's a huge risk in us jumping to the conclusion of filling out all of these things without the data. And that's ultimately creating the solution before we have the problem or the deeper insight notified or, you know, recognized. Yeah, which is why we go through that exhaustive piece before we fill this out. And here's the other thing. When I'm going to go back here, when we do this, we literally write that brief because we understand here's our key insight. We understand our enablers. And when we jump ahead then to the user insight and the user case, we know the insight, we can pretty much plug those in, by what we found through that exercise. The user case itself, we've experienced the product, and we essentially add to it the experiences and the data that we've gathered from that experience, and that we describe that in the user case. And then the problem we're solving is ultimately how are we going to deliver that deeper insight with the product that we have in mind. Does that answer your question? Yeah. And then we're getting close to wrapping this up, but a problem well stated is a problem half solved. And again, I have countless experiences of spending at least 3 to 4 weeks of a product design cycle just on creating a brief just like this. And literally out of a 10-week design cycle, spending 4 weeks on it. And by the quality of the research and the quality of the problem statements, we didn't lose any time in the design cycle. If anything, we accelerated the time in the design cycle so that by week 7 or 8, the prototypes that we had were so on point that when we showed them to our users at week 7, those prototypes were adopted for daily use as a testing mechanism. And then the last 3 weeks were spent, nailing down the story and refining the actual product before it went into production. So I can say from my own experience that this statement is absolutely true. The other thing I was going to say is I'm putting together an online course where this will be an experiential 8-week product or experience where you could go through this entire thing for your own service, product, or experience, and at the end come out with your own repeatable process as well as your own brief through this course. So that'll be available in February 2024, and you could either contact me for more information on that, or here's the QR code, and just hit me up, and I'll put you on the list. And then lastly, I wanted to offer the first 3 people who respond to this. I'm going to have a free 1-hour coaching session. So if you saw something in here that you liked and would like to go deeper in a 1-hour Zoom call, I would love to do that with you for being part of this course. And then lastly, the free killer product brief toolkit, the brief format. I also have that available online too. And just summarizing it all, it's what I found, especially today with AI on the rise and products and services equalizing, going deeper into your user and creating killer briefs is really what's going to separate you from being a commodity to those that rise and become leaders in their product space. Is there anything else you wanted to do as a wrap up? What I was thinking, we can do some Q&A. Okay. So I'll open the floor for some Q&A. Yeah.
You mind defining what?
Hang on a second, let me pass you the microphone.
Question, defining inline versus R&D.
Yeah, it's obviously it's not as relevant for small companies, but the larger your company, you'll have, in order to tackle harder problems, so you may have unvetted types of manufacturing or ideas that may take a little bit longer to figure out how to do or also to verify and test. Companies will create an innovation team, and their whole goal is to work on longer horizon project timelines. And then, similar to a startup, there's a failure rate that's also built into that. So you may have, 5 or 6 projects, 2 may see the light of day, the other 3 might fall by the wayside. So they just separate those out. So your inline is it's a pretty much a repeatable schedule and a timeline that you get things done in, let's say, 12 weeks or 12 months versus maybe 3 years for an inline or for an innovation timeline.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So if your end user may not necessarily be your customer, do you still want to just do this process for the end user and then kind of go from there? Would you recommend, like, if you have like a person who's going to use the product, but then you're going to potentially sell business to business and they're going to distribute it to the person, how would you go about that?
So let me just repeat back just to make sure I understand. So you have a certain customer that buys your service or product, but they sell it to someone else.
Sell or give away to end user.
Ultimately, I mean, you do want to understand who your actual customer is, who's buying it. But if the service or product is for someone else, you would want the someone else to be a part of that data collection, because ultimately it had the value chain. The value is for that end user or end customer.
Okay.
Yeah, and it does bring up a good point, because you'll want that kind of B2B stakeholder also involved, so that they can, I would say they're one of those key people for the team buy-in, so that they understand that what you're creating is going to be what's valuable to the people that they serve.
Okay, so yeah, so they might have some sort of say in it, but you want to make sure it's providing value to the end user.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. I mean, I think what's important is there's stakeholders, and then there's the person who's either going to find value and use it, whether they're buying or whether it's being given to them. It's really important that it's for them, because it affects everyone else back up the chain.
Cool.
I correct me if I'm wrong, we found we had to do both in that case. So we sell the product to universities, they give it to their students.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
great if the students want it, but if it's not solving a problem for the admins who are buying it. So, and I could be wrong, and we're early stage, and we've got 3 customers or 3 universities, but
Mm-hmm.
I've found it hard. I found it frustrating, because even if I say this is amazing for the students for XYZ reasons,
Yeah.
they go like, yeah, but what about, like, you're going to take away some of what we already do for the students. So does that put my job at risk, or does that make us look bad?
Yeah.
Because you're saying this is better than, the web content that we have posted already. So
Huh.
I don't know if there's a way to think about doing both, and I don't know if that's the same.
Similar.
Yeah.
Again.
Yeah, it's similar situation.
Yeah. Yeah. It sounds, I don't know, Joe, it sounds like you have.
Yeah, just from my experience with channel marketing, any channel partner is a stakeholder that you also need to understand deeply,
Right.
because their business, they have performance metrics, performance standards, requirements for their business.
Right.
The better you can, sort of get under the hood and understand what makes their business work, in addition to what drives the great customer experience for the end user, you will be the preferred solution, not just for the end user, but business to business.
Right.
If you have competition from another firm, the better you can understand what your channel partner needs, and the better you can deliver against those requirements, you really stand out versus competitors.
So I would see this as transitioning well to both, right? Talking to the buyer and talking to the end user.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's about, so your channel partner is, in a sense, a customer.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I mean, if I were to peel it back, there are biases along the way. There's biases with, the actual group that's creating the product or service. There's also biases with your, your university, customers. And then there's the actual, but that also they have needs too. I think that's the other thing, is just like they are a customer as well. And then to understand the end user as well, and making sure that there may be things that you see with each of those two users that overlap, and it can be a common win-win or common goal. But yeah, having both of those involved, and I'm not really sure how you would design that. I mean, I think ultimately you'd probably want it to be a hybrid where they're all together. And, but there may be some pre-work that needs to happen so that there's alignment as in, kind of a B2B situation, and then agree to then set those assumptions aside and work with your end user, knowing maybe some tighter parameters of what defines success, as a prelim, but also understanding that we need to pull back and eliminate as much bias as we can to understand what's important to that end user, still adhering to the goals and desires of that first customer. If that makes sense.
Yeah, and this idea of them doing it with you in a sense is interesting. We didn't do that. But I could see the value for creating that buy-in, because then, yeah, they've helped build the thing that they're supposed to push on the end user.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
I think it is about saying what success looks like for those parties, because I've also found that your sales force is your first
Yes.
customer.
Yes, yes.
But because using the university as an example, they have like success, what success looks like to them may not be the individual tool, but it's the relationship or how many students they bring in, and your product could help drive, at the end of the day for us, it was always ultimately, how are they bonused, right?
Yeah.
And so what incentive helps them be successful, and then how do you thread that needle? The other thing I was going to say, because I come out of entertainment, we did a lot of focus groups, and I think your point about digging deeper, focus groups, I think, scratch the surface. And so
Yep.
you think you hear what, people say. I should turn it around. People say what they think you want to hear from them,
Yeah.
not what they really mean.
Yep.
And so I think being able to stop and register that may not really be what they're saying. I need to go deeper and really get to the emotional connection is significantly more important.
Yeah, that's a great point with focus groups, because that was primarily what Nike did, was focus groups. And it was usually the quiet person that probably had the deeper insight, but they weren't the ones that, they would go along with the more vocal people.
I'm familiar with sort of 3 frameworks for going deeper. One is the 5 whys that you described.
Mm-hmm.
But the 2 other that I'm familiar with are sort of feeding comments back to your subject, but adding so that you've said that you desire or you value this, but tell me for what purpose you want that, so that what, right? And then there's the third one is just asking, well, how would you feel? How would you feel if you could do that, right? Like if our product solved that need for you, how would you feel about that? And just continue to take them down that path to get to that emotional statement, which is ultimately more motivating than a purely functional benefit. There's multiple paths to get to the deeper insight.
Yeah, definitely. Madison, do we have any questions from the folks? Okay. Any other questions on your end?
So a lot of the discussion here would be from voice of the customer, right? So I'm just curious, the classic, if Henry Ford had asked his customers what they need back in the day, they would have said faster horses and cars.
Yeah.
And so how do you get around that? Creating a product that customers don't even know they need, kind of thing.
Well, I think that's why you go through this process, because like you say, if you start with the assumption of the customer needs X, yeah, you can run you can run into that problem. In this case, we had a short that we wanted to de-spec, but we can also flip it around and say, do they need another short? You know, what do they really need? And I've run this process through a couple of those exercises where actually I was teaching when I was living in Oregon. I was teaching a couple of fifth year classes at U of O, and we had Paralympic athletes for three represented sports. So one was goalball, which is where you're sight impaired and you wear blindfolds, and you hurl this 3-pound ball with a bell in it, and you're lined up. Each team is lined up on the end zone of a basketball court, and they have this huge goal that spans the entire width of the basketball court, and they have to defend that goal. And when we went through this exercise of 10 weeks, 3 weeks, you're going to do user insight gathering. And, you know, the students, these were industrial design students, they were, you know, freaking out like, what, I can't sketch, I can't do any ideating. No, we need to understand what the problem is first, like what the project or your product is going to be. And in that instance alone, we said, we don't want you to define the product. We don't want you to assume what the product is going to be. We want you to go through this entire process, essentially observation, experience, and then recapping and going deeper. And it was really interesting because, you know, they had some ideas going into what the product was going to be, but when they got through that 3 to 4 weeks, what they had thought was going to be the initial product that solves the problem was completely different. So like in that case, and there was another group within for a different sport that found the same conclusion, that they had an idea of what it was going to be, but going through the process and talking to the user and what they needed, the product turned out to be completely different. So I think it's an example, but you have to go into that very clearly with that in mind. And sometimes, you know, you already have a product that has legacy, and you know that, hey, we're just trying to make a better version of this. In other cases, you may be looking to get and expand your portfolio of products, and you really just don't know. You know the customer, you can serve this customer because you have that market already established, but you can essentially say, there may be something else here, and then go through this process and something may bubble up and that product or service may identify itself.
I have one more.
Yeah.
Just thinking about like, I really like design thinking stuff, but I can from the business side, my question is going to be, does this ever fail? And if so, why? Because I think it's hard to implement because it's this kind of, you know, artsy fartsy process of like colorful stickies and windows and let's talk about our emotions. And then from that, you're supposed to get the perfect product and you're supposed to know how to market it because you've heard how they feel when they have it. And like it just seems, and I know it works, but it almost seems too good to be true, or it almost seems not precise enough or something. So I'm just curious, when does it fail, or when is it not appropriate, or what are the parameters on usage? Because otherwise, like, I know it's here, but shouldn't
Yeah.
it be here if it's that infallible, design thinking as a field?
Yeah, I think here's my experience.
Yeah.
Is that there's just there's a lot of fudge, you know, a lot of leeway when it comes to creating products and services. And we can throw a ton of data, and we should. I mean, you know, we should throw, like, we have more data, but it's interpreting the data that is really where it comes down to.
Yeah.
This is a great tool to help, like, go through the data collection, like the true data process. And that may show you a few things. But unfortunately, like data oftentimes is backwards, like you're looking backwards. And so this is a way to look forward and anticipate some unmet needs or some things that we haven't seen before, or maybe we are looking over here and the real idea is over here, which then you can apply that other data to it and make it more robust. That's the way I would look at it. I don't look at this, the way I've used it is it's augmented other ways of doing products. You know, it's looking at sales data. It's looking at all the, you know, I mean, it's got to factor in, can we make it?
Hmm.
You know, does it fit in with the business, you know, the business plan? You know, because all those things have to be considered. Yeah.
Fund effort. It seems like I hear what you're saying
Yep.
as far as artsy, but
Yeah.
my experience has been people jump to the conclusion, they have the answer before the briefs, I agree, are very high level and they don't really dig in, especially giving a designer direction.
Yeah.
And I think forcing you to say, what problem are you solving? And what is the, you know, what does success look like? Forces people to just be more clear in what it is they think they're trying to accomplish or what product they're bringing. Because I think everybody falls in love with their idea, right?
Yep.
And they think it's a great product.
Yep.
But having to step into your user's shoes and actually take the time to listen to them and then apply that back. I mean, it may just be that it's a safety net, right? You've
Yep.
come so far and then it's a confirmation of the idea. But I will say we were always forced to, it was always dig deeper. And that's where the answer always ended up being. I just think that people cut corners and then
Yep.
you think you have the answer.
It's like an anti-ego process.
Yeah, because you have to.
It
set
really
boundaries.
is. That's a
Yeah.
great way to put it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that was your comment about bias, right? We all bring bias. We all love our ideas, right? But 35% of failures are rooted in trying to solve or trying to solve a need that the customer didn't have.
Right. Yeah, and the other thing, just with that, you know, that what does success look like? The other thing I've noticed is that when the brief is really vague or is really terrible, then you start getting into the space where you're committing a lot of resources and a lot of time and potentially getting other very expensive resources involved in prototyping and manufacturing. And if you don't have that team buy-in, especially from the business and from the merchants and sales, you could be creating something that even internally you get to, you know, say a design review or a concept review, and someone who has a lot of stake in this process goes, why are you making this? Like, we didn't brief this, or why did you brief this? And so if you could have those discussions with your stakeholders with these things identified, then all of a sudden you get to that stage in the process and there will be an ego in the room that says, why are we doing this? And you say, well, we sat together, we talked to our users, we went through this whole process, and to the discipline point, this is what we all agreed to. Are we changing the scope, or are we are we still committed to what we all agreed to together? So it's a way to keep that process from devolving into chaos as well. Any other questions? Thank you all. Appreciate it.